Good day to all. I will commence the lectures on section 1.12. Previously, we stopped until the general concept, that is, what are the common observations on local standard form. What they're trying to mean here is this. Under the general principle or the common law, after the extraction by these writers, they found that our local standard form generally have this type of a content in relation to this topic. So, number one, the substantive and procedural matters related to the subject on variation. So these are the important points that they found out. The precise scope, that means the wording must be very clear. That means the valid VO, what amounts to a valid VO. And the second one is party empowering it. That is, who is authorized to issue VO. So in your PAM, it's definitely the name architect. If it's your JKR, it will be the name engineers or representative of the state government or federal government. That is JKR. If you're talking about feeding, it will be the superintending officer, the SO. Similarly, CIDB, it will be the superintending officer or the SO of the project identified by the owner of the project. And then what are the steps involved? If a VO were to be valid, what are the steps involved to ensure that the VO to be valid? For example, in your PAM, for VO to be valid, it must be in writing by the architect. So it must be an instruction in writing by the architect. And the instruction is called architect's instruction. And these are the procedures. Or sometimes the architect didn't give a written instruction, give a verbal or oral instruction. And then the architect will go back to the office and confirm it under a confirmation of the verbal instruction under the CAI. So these are the various procedures for valid variations to be issued. And then you need to identify whether the instruction is valid or invalid. Next, if it's valid, then how to evaluate the amount or the quantity. This is the valuation. And then the procedures for the contractor to get paid. For example, the contractor for our PAM 2018, first of all, must make a claim in the monthly interim certificate to incorporate it in the interim payment certificate. Then it is for the QS of the project to evaluate, and then the architect to prepare the relevant certificate. So sometimes the VO issue may not cover certain costs. So these are the additional costs that you may want to claim. So you need to support it under which section of the contract. And on top of that, sometimes the VO will give you the right for additional time. So these are the areas that you need to be careful. So from here you can see language that is drafted in our PAM 2018. It is in a very clear language. So common feature of all provision is the authorization and also the impact on the contract in relation to time and money. Okay, now we proceed on to the relevant provision under PAM 2018 in relation to VO. So first of all, you look at the clause 11. It's a general provision. It's a heading related to variation. And then these two big words here, provisional and prime costs. So generally, variation for the works will be triggered by many means. And for these two, prime cost and provisional sum is a special variation. It's a special variation order to trigger the selection of NSC or NS into the main contractor system. So this is a very important understanding. The allocation of provisional sum and prime cost will trigger the selection of NSCs or NS, the nominal subcontractors or owner suppliers, into the main contractor system. Is this, first of all, must have a provisional sum or prime cost sum. And then the architect will issue a variation order, a special variation order, using the AI. So issue an AI, okay, to trigger. So now, under this variation clause, we go a little bit on detail already. So you need to go back to your PAM on clause 11. I'm running through your clause 11 because this one is an almost extraction from this PAM clause 11. So you need to really understand each and every of the provision here. See here? So first of all, the definition of variation. What is the meaning? Okay, so when you're looking into it, it has to be alteration, modification on the design of the project, quality and quantity of the project. So this is the meaning, a broad meaning. Okay, so this is a detailed one. You were asked to code under which category this variation located. I mean, the clause located to support the issue of the support for the architect to issue the instruction. So the architect may code 11.1a if it is an addition, omission of any work, or 11.1b for the alteration, and 11.1c is for the removal of works that are not in accordance with the contract. So be careful, this 11.1c is an instruction where the contractor will not get any additional money because it is works that is not in accordance with the contractor. It's a contractor's fault. And then 11D, it can be a positive or it can be a negative change. A, B, and C, A, B, D can be positive and negative. So in this case, but D1 to D5, this one will trigger positives. Okay, so basically it's this. A1, 11.1A, sorry, 11.1A, 11.1B will definitely have positive, negative. 11.1C is just an instruction for the contractor to comply. 11.1D, basing on D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, more often than not, will trigger additional payment and time even to the contractor. Okay, so these are the important provision for the architect to instruct where which clause or provisions under the contract allow the architect to do so. But please remember, this one is a standard. Any negligence due to the contractor, any error due to the contractor's fault or breach of the contractor, a contract by the contractor, definitely, I use the term, definitely is contractor own cost to rectify. It is the same as 11C. 11C is own cost to rectify. Now we go into the next one, clause 11.2. So this 11.2 is given the architect the authority to issue an AI in relation to the project. So all the AI issued by the architect, it means here, no variation ordered by the architect. What does it mean? It means a valid variation ordered by the architect shall not reshape the contract. It means that the contract is still operating. Shall not reshape the contract means contract still operational. If without this, each time a variation is issued, even is valid, the existing contract have to be revised. So with this one, it means already aware from day one, there will be a lot of changes and that changes won't affect the existing contract. So this is your clause 11.2. What it mean? 11.3. So is at any time before CPC, generally architect under clause 11.3 can issue VO at any time before the issue of CPC. Once the CPC issued, most of the time, VO for the project cannot be issued anymore, except, I repeat, generally in contracts under PEM 2018, once a CPC is issued, it means that the architect cannot issue any VO for the works anymore. But under clause 11.3 is a very special provision allowing the architect to issue VO even after CPC for this category only. Appropriate authority. Example, for works to be carried out to comply with appropriate authority. Example, TNB. The so-called water supply. TNB is electrical one, and then the water supply. And others. Under the requirement for the building to be operational. Service provider, example, service provider, the Inda water. For your sewerage, plus others. So these are two areas where VO can be issued after CPC. So if I ask a question, can an architect issue VO after CPC? The answer is yes and no. Okay. Yes is for this appropriate authority and service provider. No for the existing work. And clause 11.4, I mentioned to you earlier, is on the PC sum and provisional sum. How the amount that are allocated here can be spent and then added to the main contractor's so-called contract sum. So this one must have a PC sum and provisional sum for the architect to issue the AI. So 11.5 is a big change. What you can see here is under the PEM 2006. So now you can see 2018. These are the new description which modify the old clause 11.5 in relation to measurement and valuation. So here last time you can see a lot of the so-called time are not here, isn't it? They don't have the time, but now you can see there is a time provision for the QS or the architect to look into any dispute on the valuation. So these are the new so-called refinements over your OPEM clause to this 2018. The content is almost the same except only there are time bar already. So these are the time allocated for certain things to be dealt with by the architect and the QS. See, just so you can see, architect need all this information to carry out the valuation. So here there is a time for objection and so on by the contractor. Previously is silent. And see here is silent. So now they extend it because these are the usual problem at the project site. Last time we have no time limit and all these things. The contractor is at the disadvantage. So now you can see PEM 2018 is a bit fairer to the contractor. If not, the architect will use the so-called reasonable time, which is very difficult for the contractor to challenge. So clause 11.6 is on the valuation, how to value the VO work executed. So the rules here will be 11.6a. Pay attention to this. It's very important because these are the very important clauses for the QS rather than the architect. So 11.6a, if you ask to evaluate, so how to trigger 11.6a, where your contract document rates applicable. So you have to use your contract document rates for works that are similar character, number one, and then similar condition. So that means that the work must be executed under similar character and similar condition. Then the contract document rates and price must be used for the evaluation, number one. And 11.6b, okay, the works is similar character and not executed under similar condition. I have to explain further for you. Okay, so please differentiate between the term character and condition. So what rate to use? And then you use the rate in the document to be used as a base plus adjustment for the difference in condition. Fair adjustment in the rates to take account of the difference in condition. So I go back to character. Example, okay? Character, if it's a beam. So, and then under similar condition. Okay, so let's say this one, the beam, the formwork. So your formwork at 3.5 meter high. So if you got this one, if a VO for a beam to do another location and the height of the formwork is 3.5, then you must use the contract rate and price to pay for this additional beam to be cast elsewhere. Okay, so another one, example, just give example, similar character. Let's say it's asked to construct a beam in different location. Okay, but now the condition here, I just say it's also formwork at 5.0 meter height. So you can see now, is it the same condition? It's different. Your contract is 3.5, but now it's 5.0. So if it's 3.5 in the BQ, you use this rate applicable. You cannot use a 3.5 rate in the BQ to pay for the height in 5.0 meter high. So it's a different condition. If your BQ have a beam, same character, and the formwork height is 5.0 meter, then you use that rate to pay. So that means the contract rate, there is such a similar character, but the height differentials are there. If there is no such rate, then you use the 3.5 meter height rate for the formwork plus adjustment for the increase in the support system. I hope you are clear. So then you know how to use clause 11.6b. 11.6c, works not of similar character. It means a different type of work and different condition. Then how to value the new rates? It will be at fair market price or rates to be calculated or determined by QS. Very specifically, QS is the one. Contractors can submit their rates, but ultimately QS would the one to give the figure to the architect. In this case here, the architect won't disturb the QS on this. Okay, so this 11.6c, that is different character, different condition. Then D. So I give you examples on C. For example, in your contract, you have your beam and column, but now you're asked to do something, maybe a slab that is totally not available in your project description. So that one is of different character and different condition. So then you have to use this to evaluate. And 11.6D, works cannot be properly measured and valued. So you can see when works cannot be properly measured and valued, I give you an example. Demolition. Demolition works, example. Okay, you can, how to measure, how to value? You find that is very problematic. So that means it's not covered under 11.6A, B, or C. If it's not covered in 11.6A, B, or C, then option number 1, you use day work rate. So sometimes in your BQ, you have day work rates for your machinery, plant, material, and so on in the contract document. Okay. So now, what happens if there is no such day work rates in the document? Then what you're going to do? Then no choice. That means you are going to do cost plus. actual cost plus 15% is called cost plus for that particular work. That means the contractor is guaranteed profit, cost plus. This one means cost plus. Okay, so this is how you evaluate as a QS. Then, in order to evaluate cost plus, a lot of information need to be provided by the contractor and signed, verified by the site people. Okay, so these are the details will be provided and signed by the site agent and the staff, site staff. So this is important. Okay, so as a QS, you can only depend on the documents that are produced by the site staff, signed by the site staff and by the site agent or the representative of the site agent. I repeat, as a QS, you have to evaluate as per the vouchers, timesheets, material that are signed or endorsed by the site agent representative or site agent or the site staff or the site representative assigned by the named architect. I hope you are clear. QS have no authority to adjust any of the figure that is signed by the site staff and the site agent. You have no authority. You cannot say that, I think this figure is wrong. No such thing as I think. You better certify accordingly. If you are not sure that or something is not correct, you better get it back to the site staff and the site agent to countersign and to change the figure. If you were to unilaterally change the figure, you are in trouble. That is beyond your authority. For a simple reason, you can never win this argument because the contractor will raise it up. How can you know that it is not correct if you are not present at the site all the time? So this is something important. These are the important point that you need to remember. I've seen a lot of QS working at the project site. They slash here, slash there at their own whims and fancies. But it's illegal. As long as it is signed by the site agent representative or site agent or the site staff, that is the employers or the architect representative, you pay accordingly. If you want to bring it up to the owner of this thing or the architect, it's up to you. But that is the figure you have to honor first. If not, you send it back to the site for correction if you think there is something not correct. You never do it unilaterally. I repeat here, you don't do it unilaterally. You don't have that authority to do such a thing. Clear? So, okay. So all these need to be delivered to the architect and the QS at weekly interval. So it's important. That's why time are given here. Okay. So that to avoid confusion. Because if you are not clear, then immediately you can ask for clarification, and not after 1 month later you ask the site people for clarification. Your request is going to be rejected. So you have 14 days. 11.6E is for omission. So very interestingly, any item that are omitted, you must use the BQ rate. Okay, because the BQ rate will be the basis for valuing all the omission. No other principle, only BQ rate to evaluate your omission. So 11.6F, there's a change in the description to this. So this is the PAM 2018 where times are introduced. There's change and time are introduced. You can see here previously 2016, there is no time element. Here now there's a time element. In respect of provisional quantity, that means the remeasured quantity, provisional quantity, okay, have to be remeasured by QS. It's the QS duty to remeasure. The actual quantity executed within 60 days after the work completed. So QS must get it done. Do you know why this is so? It is because previously, under your PEM 2006, without 60 days, QS will sit in the office, although the work is completed, still don't want to pay the contractor. And the contractor cannot do anything. So with this clause incorporated, if you sit it there for more than 60 days, you are in trouble because it is a breach by the employer. Your breach is equal to the employer's breach. So the employer will be in trouble and the employer will come after you. So please be careful. So usually this one will be the basis for evaluation. Okay. The rates and price in the contract document shall be used for the valuation of the revised quantity. This 11.7 is a very important clause here. Why is important? You can see here it ties back to this clause. After I locate again for you again. So 11.7 is in relation to your variation. So when there is a valid VO, you already been paid for the valid VO in terms of quantity and the rates in the BQ and so on. But sometimes the contractor incur additional expenses which cannot be covered under your clause 11.6. That means a variation clause is not sufficient to cover the work that is carried out by the contractor. So what the contractor must do. So this is a very important clause for the contractor. If the contractor find that although they are paid once already for the work done and evaluate under clause 11.6. 11.6, it means 11.6A to B and C and D and so on. Okay. Now 11.A, B, D, these are the clauses that the contractor are paid. But then if the contractor have every ground to tell you that there are additional expenses incurred on top of the provisions in your clause 11.6 A, B, D, and so on, then the contractor must follow this procedure. If the contractor didn't follow this procedure, more often than not, the rights of the contractor for these additional expenses would be extinguished. So what the contractor needs to follow must give notice of the claim. This is step number 1. Contractor must give written notice to the architect. When to give the notice? Notice must be given within 28 days of the AI or CAI. That means that when you issue the instruction by the architect, contractor must be within 28 days of the AI or the CAI. Give the notice. So this is a very important point. Is on AI or CAI and not on completion of the work. A lot of the contractor mistaken. Oh, no problem. This is a VO work. I will finish the VO work, then only I submit my claim. Sorry. Your claim for your physical work under the contract 11.6, no problem. You submit, end of the work, you claim, or you claim it under the progressively, depending on the VO, how massive. But this, in order for the contractor to ask for additional payment on top of the payment under the clause 11.6, contractor must give written notice. Shall means must. There's no two way about it. Shall here means must. To the architect, intention to claim. When? Within 28 days from the AI or CAI and not from the completion of the work. A lot of them got caught. Completion of the work, then submit. Then architect or the QS bring this clause 11.7 up. It's already over 28 days already. Your rights is going to be extinguished. Such written notice is a condition precedent to any entitlement of the additional expenses by the contractor. It's a very powerful statement here. Condition precedent. It means mandatory to be complied. Condition precedent is mandatory to be complied. If it's not mandatory, then you are excusable. Okay, contractually, I'm talking about contractually. If you don't follow this, your contractual rights of the claim is extinguished. Repeat, the rights under PEM 2018 is your contractual rights. If you don't follow the procedures as written under the contract, your rights of any party that didn't follow any of the procedures would be extinguished contractually. It is different from your common law rights. Common law rights is different. You look at your Limitation Act. For your rights under common law, the duration of your rights expire after the expiry of the Limitation Act provision. The Limitation Act 1953, which is one of the tutorial questions. You read it up, then you know already. Normal contract, 6 years. Special contract, 12 years. Tort, 6 years, and so on. So this is something for you to be very, very careful. Okay, that is 11.7. So then the next one is, this one is 11.7a. 11.7b, that is within 28 days You complete everything, then you must send it to the architect or the QS. If you already comply with your 11.7a, then your rights are established. Then the second thing you must follow, but this is not so fatal. The most important one is your number 11.7a, the initial notice. You have to get it done. 11.7b is after the 28 days, within 28 days of completing the work. So be careful. The completing the work can be months or even years away from the AI. Please be careful. The AI can be given today, and this work to be carried out maybe 6 months or even 9 months or 3 months down the line. 11.7b is operational when your works are completed. Then within 28 days, you must furnish everything to the architect and QS for payment. If you don't do that, chances are you don't blame the architect for not paying you. Okay? So, contractor failed to submit the required particulars within the stated time. Here is a warning already. It shall deem that the contractor has waived his right to such additional payment. So that means it may give the idea to the architect or to the QS. Although you did notify me under 11.7a for the additional expenses going to be incurred. But if you fail on 11.7b without all the details, it may give the idea that you don't want such additional money to be paid. So these are the very important provision if you are working for contractor. Similarly, if you are working for consultant, these are the grounds to reject the contractor's contractual claim. I hope you are clear on this particular point. So these are important. I go very slow. It's very important clause for you. So okay, next one is 11.8. If you want to claim for additional payment, this is related additional payment. Clause 11.7 is additional payment. So you must keep records. What type of record? This is a very important concept. Contemporaneous record. It means that the record must be timely. What is the timely? Because the rule here is usually you need to submit all your records in a timely manner. So the timely manner is stated here. Is within 28 days of everything completed, you have to submit everything to support. Or sometimes you may submit earlier. Okay, so this is something that is on record keeping, so that you can give it to the architect and the QS for evaluation, checking, and so on. And they ask for additional copy, you have to give it to the architect and the QS on the contemporaneous record. Contemporaneous record means data which are at the same time the works So I hope you understand this important point. It means data which are recorded at the same time when the works carried out. What does that mean? To some of you may not be clear. If your work on the VO is on, let's say, July 2021, your data or the records must show somewhere between June, July, and August. This is called contemporaneous, very near to the action, to the activity record. You cannot have a data, the paper of claim or your submission that is too early or too late. Are you clear? Contemporaneous means around that time. Okay, so the data when you want to submit for substantiation, it has to be around that time. Let's say your work is July, because there's a possibility you may purchase earlier by 1 month or so. And then at the end of the day, to collect it from the supplier 1 month or so. It cannot be 1 year later, then only, oh, this document to be supported for my claim, where the date shown is 1 year away. Now, this is not contemporaneous. It's very fishy. The information is very, very fishy. So chances are it may be subject to a lot of query. So this is something for you to think about. So not only subcontractors, suppliers and subcontractors also need to support the main contractor in event of this claim. So this is something for the main contractor to be careful. 11.9. So why 11.9 is important is on the payment to the main contractor. So once this is already evaluated here under clause 11.8, then the amount have to be reflected in the interim certificate. And that amount have to be paid to the main contractor. So this is why it's important, this clause, because last time a lot of VOs, the consultant just don't want to pay, keep it there, strangle the contractor cash flow. Okay, so okay, we stop here for 5 minutes break. We'll continue 4:55. So see you at 4:55. So there are a few 14 absent 14. Of you are still absent. The team is still absent. Okay, welcome back everyone. Can you hear me and see the screen share? Can you see the screen share? Okay, thanks everyone. Okay. Now we go on to the VO that are valid. And what are the steps to be complied? So if you are the QS for the project, on behalf of the client, so these are the things that you must have, okay, to certify payment. If not, you will be in trouble. So first of all, you have to be a valid VO. How can a valid VO be issued? So these are the items that you must have. Number one, it have to be an AI from the architect. Under PAM, it must be AI. It cannot be EI or whatever. It have to be an AI, architect's instruction, because under PAM, architect is the party, because that document is specifically drafted, standard form, for the architect. Okay. If you want to talk about engineers, then possibly you have to go for JKR type of contract. Then the instruction there will be engineer's instruction, no more architect's instruction. So the type of standard form will dictate who can issue the relevant instruction. Please read the clause properly. And who to do it? It must be the architect that is named. So how to show that it is named? This is something that you have to look into. So this is your name architect. By the way, can you still read the screen share? Please revert because I already hide it. Sometimes I hide it, the screen is missing. Please reply. So can you see the screen share now? So you can see here. Okay, thanks. I can. Okay, good. So this is the name architect here, Article 3. See? So only this person that is named here can issue the instruction. Are you clear? This particular person here, named here. The term architect in this context shall mean of some company. Here, the name here. Mr. Misler or whoever of which architect's firm. So this is what you need to have this name authorized to sign. Okay. If it's an engineer, it's the engineer here, but the engineer will issue instruction, but it must pass the instruction to the architect, and the architect will attach the AI and send it out, and not EI. If you use the EI, you're in trouble. Okay. So please be careful. You must be the name architect. And then you have to be compliant with your clause 11.1. That means the 11.1, under which part of 11.1 you need to state whether it's 11.1 A, B, C, D, and so on. Okay, so the architect will quote this type of supporting clause, empowering the architect to do so. Okay, so in addition to the above, this is something will help you understand the principle of a valid VO. Okay? The validity of the VO must follow the contract requirement or the concept of the contract. The validity of the VO have to be followed. That is, what the project is all about need to be followed, and it mustn't be a cardinal change. If it's a cardinal change, it is an invalid VO. Okay? So this is the contractual principle. And now the common law principle to explain further. So this is the in compliance with your original scope of work. Then this is a valid VO. So it is a material in excess. So what is an invalid VO? So this is one of them. Material in excess of the agreed sum. For example, your contract is 1 million contract sum. VO issued becomes 20 million. So this falls under the cardinal change. Agreed? Okay? That is in terms of value. Very excessive. Type 1. Cardinal change at type 1. Type 2. Okay? Fundamental change of nature of work. This is what we are talking all along. Change in the nature of the work. This one is considered as cardinal change. So cardinal change, or the one I'm talking is type 1. This is the change of nature of work. But another one under this case law bring you another meaning of a cardinal change. That means the agreed contract sum is, let's say, 1 million. Now it issue a VO to 20 million. So these are material in excess of the agreed sum, also considered as cardinal change. If it's a cardinal change, contractually invalid. Clear? So this is important concept for you to take back. So cardinal change, that means you change to something so different, and it is contractually invalid. Next thing is when to issue VO. I mentioned to you already under your clause 11.3 just now. No? Okay. So can issue VO for the works before CPC issued. For the works before CPC issued. Clause 11.3. After CPC issued, can still issue VO or not? Answer is yes. It is to comply with AA and SP. This one is considered as AA and SP, short form. I even give you some examples of AA already. And service provider, appropriate authority. It could be the local authority and so on. If architect issue VO that does not fall within this, then it is invalid. So no duty to comply. So this is what they try to say. If it is an invalid VO, no need to comply. So all valid VO for the work must be issued before CPC. And VO outside the work after the CPC can be issued for two situations, SP and AA. That is to comply with the authority and so on. Local authority, health authority, road authority, and so on. So when to measure VO? So sometimes the VO is very simple, then it's usually at the end of the work. But if the VO is very massive and very varied, then you look at the measurement can be after the work executed. Before the work executed is for working out the budget. While the work being executed is for very big type of job, where will be eventually progressive payment to be claimed while the work being executed. You measure and then sometimes they are going to be buried, cast in or buried. Then you take photos to substantiate it. Before the work executed, when you are given a good plan or drawings, then you can take it. After the work completed, if it is not buried, if it's buried, then you cannot. So, or you can measure it from the as-built drawing. So these are the so-called measurement for finalization of the account. Usually after the as-built drawing is produced or the work in progress and so on. So more often than not, you as a contractor, if it's a very major type of work where there is many months, then you take the measurement as the work in progress. And some of them, you may even know your figure if the drawings are clear. So the rule is try to submit your claim contemporaneous with your work as soon as possible. It means that contemporaneous with your work. When the works are ongoing, then you submit and do your measurement. Contemporaneous will be the keywords again. So have to be endorsed by the parties present, especially the site representative of the employer and the owner. So the owner will be clerk of work, and then the site representative of the contractor will be the project managers or whatever. So this is how you evaluate. I mean, how to value. When to measure. How to evaluate? I already mentioned to you that your clause 11.6a to F will be the basis for evaluation. Okay? And then here, additional claim for money on the VO, can claim or not? Answer is yes. If contractor invoke clause 11.7a and 11.7b. So in order to claim, contractor need to invoke 11.7a and b. That means it's a two-stage. First is an initial notification, then subsequent when the works completed already will be your so-called final notification. So this is important for the contractor to get money to be paid. And also all the records need to follow the contemporaneous records and supporting document to be provided. So when all of them are evaluated already, then it will be reflected in the interim certificate under clause 11.9. Okay, so these are important on the payment. You need to reflect it as soon as possible so that they can be incorporated into the interim payment certificate. So this is the main contractor one. How about the NSCs? It's the same process as the main contractor. NSCs need to submit all their documents to the main contractor. That is the only difference. Because NSCs cannot submit their claim directly to the architect for payment processing. No, it must go through the main contractor. It is the NSC's VO. But if it's the NSC's VO to the main contractor, it's a private one. So there are two categories, VO. One of them is claimable with the owner. One of them is claimable against the main contractor. So there are two types, the VO. So be careful. Here, we are talking about claimable against the employer. Okay. So the principle governing the main contract, main contract, is applicable to the NSC's contract. Okay. So it only slightly procedure difference only. Okay. So and the clause applicable under the PEM subcontract, these are the clauses that are relevant for the evaluation and processing of the NSA's so-called payment and so on. Okay. So NSA's claim to be valid must comply with this so-called procedural requirement. If not, then you won't get your money. Okay. So now the next thing is, if it's invalid and unenforceable. So I mentioned again and again. Now what we are talking is contractual claim that could be invalid due to timing, due to certain procedure not comply. What will happen? If the contractual claim to be invalid or unenforceable, then there is a procedure under the extra contractual basis. That means you are claiming under the common law already on the basis of quantum merit claim. So quantum merit claim, you got the right under the common law to claim extra over the contract rate, not a normal contractual provision. Okay? So this is on the quantum merit basis against the main contractor. So this one is a private contract between the NSAs and the main contractor if in the event is not claimable to the employer or sometimes invalid due to the procedure. Here is a lot of procedure to be complied. Then there's a possibility extra contractual basis can come in. Similarly, for the main contractor and the employer, this principle is still applicable. You just change it to the employer here. Okay, the main contractor and employer. So the main contractor do contractually cannot, then there is a extra contractual basis or common law basis, then you can claim. Whether it's going to be paid under the quantum merit basis or actual cost basis, that have to be worked out. With that, we come and end today's topic 12. We're going to continue with your topic 13. And topic 13 is related to your liquidated damages, LD. So what is LD? So as usual, you can see once I highlight in gray, it is the general concept or common law concept. General or So this basic principle is this. If the completion of the work is delayed, so what does this mean? Completion of the work delayed. So you must understand the term, completion of the work delayed. It means that the contractor unable to complete the work by the original completion date. So this is one point. This is the type 1 delay, where the contractor cannot finish on the original date. Number 2, type 2, cannot comply with this by any new date fixed by the contract administrator. That means a revised date given to you also cannot complete. Number 3, so you can see here, any new date fixed by the contract administrator, because it is caused by the contractor who cannot have a valid extension. Because the contractor do not have ground for a valid extension. Then the contractor is breach of the contract. Then what does the employer options available? So under the common law concept or general concept, the employer can continue with the contract. That means affirm the contract and then allow the contractor to carry out the work, but recover the money due to that breach. Okay, type 1. Or the employer, because it is a breach, accept the repudiation and then determine the contractor's contract and then claim for the loss or damage. So which one the employer were to take is up to the employer. Okay. So generally for number 2 is for serious breach. Okay. If it is a serious breach, then number 2 will be invoked. If not, usually it's number 1. You affirm the breach and then find how to charge the contractor. Okay. So serious breach, because the contractor is way behind proceeding the work, then is way behind and not capable of proceeding steadily with the work. The most obvious choice is to adopt the, so actually it's number 2, second option, repudiation. Unless the breach is so serious, sorry, that means if it is not so serious, then number 1. If it's serious, it will be number 2. So if it's not serious one, unless the breach is so serious, that means it's not serious case, then the employer will have the first option. So you recover the damage. How to recover damage? That means inside the contract mechanism or formula to compute it, what we have in our PAM is the liquidated damage clause. So this clause that we have, okay? Or alternatively, you claim for unliquidated damages using court action. So this one is a very messy one. Okay, go through the court action. So to me, try to avoid this category. So usually the first one will be invoked for not serious so-called problem. If it's a serious problem, then repudiation or termination of the contract will be invoked already. Okay. So financial contractual remedy is a preferred mode in the construction industry. That means the type 1. This one is the type 1 remedy. Okay, this is the type 1 remedy. This one is the type 1. And this one is your type 2. So what is the meaning of liquidated damages? LD or LAD. In our PEM is LD, but others is using LAD. So in Malaysian context, it's very interesting because ours is slightly different from other country. Because LD is the damages is already pre-computed, pre-calculated, pre-known figure. If there is a default, that is the LD. Okay, so in Malaysian context, the LD clause has a unique attention by academics or even by the legal people. Why? It is because of a landmark decision in the federal court under Sewakumar versus Tyagaraja. Okay, so this is a very important point that you need to understand under the Malaysian environment, which I'm going to cover more below. Okay, so now elaborate further is the meaning of what does it mean non-completion. Okay, already I mentioned to you earlier, you cannot finish within the original contract duration or the valid extension. So if you cannot finish within the original contract duration or its valid extension, then the project is considered as non-completed. So contractor's obligation is expressly spelled out in the contract, because there is a commencement date and a completion date. So this is expressly stated out. That means under your PEM, it will be written here. Okay. Date of commencement, date of completion if it is only one phase. If there are many phases, then you have it here. Different commencement, different completion. This one you have your different phase. So this one having different phase. If it's single phase, only the top one you will see. And then you must have the individual LD. So this one is in phases. So a project usually have this type, or sometime have this type. Okay, so depending what project they're having, and also always there is a figure. Without this figure, LD is invalid. So this is how it's expressly stated here. Expressed in the contract is appendix under your PEM. Okay. So to complete the whole of the work on or before the date of completion stated. So that is the day they stated. Is on or before. Or sometime under a valid extension. Such extended time as may be allowed under the contract. It means valid extension of time given. Okay. If you cannot complete, then it will be subject to the LD, that is the contractual provision, or UD. This one is the or UD. To see the difference, contractual rights and common law rights. So definition of LD, the term LD stated in the contract in the event of the breach for late completion. So this is the definition, and the figure must be genuine pre-estimate. So this is a very important principle in other country. In Malaysia, it's slightly different. In other country, this LD must be a genuine pre-estimate or reasonable estimate. Okay, so if that happen, then no need to prove actual loss after the event. It does not matter whether the loss is higher or lower than the sum stated, or even there is no loss. So this one is applicable in other jurisdiction. Due to the Contract Act 1950, Section 75. So this is what is important. Okay, so this provision under the common principle, LD is a genuine estimate, then don't need to prove actual loss already. Actual damage, no need to prove actual damage. That is a very important point. But in Malaysia, this is not so true. Okay, so this principle is applicable in other jurisdictions and not in Malaysia due to the Contract Act 1950 Section 75, which we're going to cover more later. So LD is something evaluated or fixed in advance. That is the common understanding concept. So summary of liquid damages, some agreed or fixed in advance by the party. Okay, it had to be reasonable or genuine pre-estimate. And then it must be stipulated in the contract. I mentioned to you at the back there, I keep on stressing this point. It must be stated in the contract here. It must be stated. If you don't state it here, your LD is not effective. Okay. So the recovery have to be triggered by a specific event. What is specific event? It is the late completion. So these are the key points or definition of liquidated damages. So recovery of liquidated damage by employer. So be careful, this item here on the liquidated damage, it is only the employer got the right to exercise it, not the architect. Architect only do all the paperwork administratively, okay, under the contract, under your PAM. But once this is triggered, it is up to the employer to seek recovery of the LD. Architect and QS can recommend what the figures to deduct only, okay, but never touch this one in your certificate because it is a private arrangement, whether the employer want to deduct it today or now or later or even don't want to deduct. It's up to the employer. It's nothing to do with the contract administrator. The contract administrator is important, need to follow the details as laid out in the contract, like in the PAM. What are the procedure to be done correctly? The contract administrator must follow. If not, then the employer may not be able to get that money. Okay, whether temporary or permanently, depending on the situation. Okay, so whether it's a standard contract or bespoke contract, you have to read carefully because the nature extent governing this LD could be different. So this is important point for the employer to impose LD. It is the employer's right, but the process to get it done, the contract administrator need to help out to tidy up the paperwork. If the paperwork is not done correctly, employer may not recover the liquid damages or delay in recovering the liquidated damages. So we're going to go in detail under our PAM. So it is important upon the employer and the administrator to be very familiar with these procedures. If not, your action could be invalid. Once invalid, then recovery of the damages could be in question. It means sometimes your rights are extinguished or sometimes it's temporarily extinguished. Okay, so you need to follow. If not, you will be in trouble. I will go detail later on this item here. Okay, so how to get it done? Basically, there must be a default by the contractor. So the recovery of LD is due to the default by the contractor on not completing on time. So this is the prerequisite for the contract administrator to invoke LD. Okay, but before that, generally, the contract administrator must evaluate all the EOT before you impose. If not, it would be not so proper. Okay, so all extension of time have properly entitled and issue to the evaluate and issue to the contractor. So this is point 1. That means once you properly evaluate already, that means the contractor won't be entitled for any EOT. So that is the reason behind it. So either the contractor failed to complete on the original date or the revised date when all the EOT are evaluated and added to it. So this is the prerequisite for LAD to be imposed. So once it is established that the contractor cannot finish, then this can be triggered. If not, the imposition of the LD is not so correct. So on top of that, as usual, these are the substantive issues that need to be present in the contract document. There is an express provision for LD. That means there is a clause for LD. Okay, and then it must be a valid and an enforceable clause. If you don't have that, then it will be a problem. So with the proper filling in details pertaining to LD. Example proper details to LD is this one. This is the proper details. There must be a starting date, ending date, and LD amount here. This is the proper one. Your starting date, ending date, and the amount one, your LD provision is defective. Similarly here, starting date, ending date, without LD for each section is defective. Clear? So if you have all this definitive date, then only the computation of LD can be calculated properly. If not, you don't know how or when the LD commences. The employer right of recovery subject to contractor challenge. As usual, any monetary item is always subject to challenge. So that means the CA, contract administrator, must be very careful to protect the interests of the employer. So if it's the enforceability and the validity then you find that you may have to drop the LD claim. You find that it is contractually wrong or there is a procedurally wrong to impose the LD. Okay, then the employer claim for UD under the common law. So you can see what we are dealing is contractual provision. Sometimes the contractual provision, for example here, that the employer forgot to put a figure here. So contractually, the LD to be imposed here is nothing. So contractually is zero. But then, common law, you will claim for UD. So UD is a common law provision under common law. Then you evaluate by using the lawyers to submit your claim. It's no more the people working at the project. This one is UD. In short, that is UD or general damage. So I hope you understand this important point. So whether employer waives the right, as I mentioned earlier just now, the employer is the only party that can take the money away from the contractor. The architect is the administrator of the project or to facilitate the employer's rights or to protect the employer's right. So these are important points. That means the extension of time need to be evaluated, the contract duration expired, and so on. Then we have complied already, the first two steps. Okay. So the next step will be whether the employer is going to deduct or not. Or sometimes waive the right. So all depends. It's up to the employer. Verify whether the employer want to impose LD or sometimes with the LD imposition to the contractor. Okay. So this is important point here. It is incumbent on the CA to determine whether such a waiver is supported by any consideration from the contractor. So possibly there may be some appeal by the contractor to ask the employer to waive, or sometimes the contractor may raise contractually your rights cannot be imposed because there's something defective in your document. For example, these are the defective in the document without the amount and so on. So employer should withdraw the waiver to the notice. So all this depending in terms of legal sense. If the contractor got the rights and given the consideration for the employer not to impose, then the architect have to follow suit. Or the contractor have the rights, maybe there is no consideration given, there's a possibility the employer may withdraw the waiver by giving notice. So this is something is up to the employer and the contractor. Okay. So once a waiver is given, if the employer says, okay, don't have to pay, and then the contractor confirm it with consideration, then you cannot claim LD again. So please remember the operation of a waiver and consideration. It's a complete defense. I hope you understand the term, complete defense. That means protecting your rights. Okay. So procedure to be complied. So these are the steps to be complied by the consultants generally. Okay. In most condition of contract, what to comply? The architect must issue certificate of non-completion. This is a very important, it's a condition precedent to make the right to recover LD valid. If you don't have this CNC issued, the right is not there. So there must be a CNC issued, okay? Because it is a precondition. Precondition means mandatory to be complied. If you fail to comply, render imposition of LD unlawful. Okay, so this is very important. So if you want, there is a Malaysian case law to support this. So currently the prevailing local practice of deducting LD provisionally that is before the issue of CNC is actually illegal. So please remember, this is happening in the industry. No CNC issued, take the money out. Ask the employer to take the money out. It is illegal and should be discontinued. I hope you must advise the client properly. It amounts to repudiation of the contract by the employer. It means that the contractor can make use of this ground to terminate the contract. Okay, that means the contractor to determine or to end the contract. Okay, entitle the contractor to determine the contract. Okay, provided the corresponding ground for determination is expressly included in the contract. So usually there will be grounds for determination. If there's a ground for determination, then these are done correctly. If not, then it will be incorrectly. So once it is done correctly, so how to take the money back by the employer? Okay, so all standard form of condition of contract that the recovery of liquidated, it must be the employer. I repeat now countless times. Contract administrator is a facilitator to carry all the paperwork correctly. It is only the employer, no other people can take the money back from the contractor. The contract administrator role is merely advising the employer of the contractual rights. Repeat. Advising the employer contractual right. The amount, the formula, and also the mode of effecting the same, how to take it out. So in our PAM, it is not reflected in the certificate. It is a private deduction. So by issuing the certificate of non-completion, with a copy to the employer, the contract administrator fulfill the advisory role. Then leaving the employer to decide whether to take it out or not at the appropriate time. So this one I already mentioned to you earlier. Okay, it's only the contract administrator will be administrative role. Once it's done already, now leaving the employer to recover at what time is up to the employer already. So he cannot simply go and deduct without this paperwork done. Okay, so the CNC must be issued. So the employer cannot do so prior to this. Example, the so-called provisional deduction or what is premature and contractually unlawful. So what are the important points for the employer to able to deduct properly? So first of all, there must be CNC issued and contractor receive a copy, employer receive a copy. So if the employer affirm willing to deduct already, okay, then the next is to determine the timing of the deduction. And then the mode of the deduction. It can be piecemeal, can be one lump sum, can be whatever. Okay. Then the employer can deduct according to the formula as per the contract condition. So if it is not sufficient, then you can get it from the retention sum or from the performance bond. Okay. If it's not sufficient, then as a debt from the contractor. So these are the mechanism for the employer to take it back. From the sum due, retention sum, or take legal action against the contractor. Okay. So employee who have paid the contractor in full, So for example, after the certificate already issued, final certificate, all this issue and money paid already, can the contractor take the LD back? Or depends on the contract that is signed. If the contract is silent on this, then the money can be deducted again. If not, then employer waives the right. So employer who paid the contractor in full, is not barred to pursue the claim if there is no express clause to deny this. Next. Usually, if you want to get the money, please do so within the time limit of the Limitation Act. If no, your rights is going to be expired. So therefore, it's advisable to deduct them timely. Okay? It's up to the employer to deduct in one lump sum or deduct the money progressively from the interim certificate. It's up to the employer. So this is what we have covered. So we stop here on the general principle. To continue this Friday. But before that, I want to make an announcement. So now, I intend to give you your test on this so-called 17th of July. Your test, 17th of July, Saturday. Can you mark your calendar to make sure you attend the test? 17 July, 17 2021. PPP III test. I will tell you the time. So please be present. Most probably this one will be around 10 to 2 p.m. That range, the test will be held 10 to 2 p.m. Okay? Please make yourself available, because if you didn't take the test, chances for me to reset another test is going to be very difficult. Okay? So you must give valid reason. If you don't give valid reason, then the university will say that you will be given a 0 for the test. That is the university rule. Okay? If you got the reason, then there's a possibility that you can sit for the so-called replacement test. Okay? We have a replacement FA, replacement exam. So there is a replacement test if you got valid reason. If your reason is not valid, you're going to get a 0. Is okay? So 17 Saturday, please take note everyone. Let me check here how many already present. 181. That means 8 of you present are absent. So can you, those who are present one, inform your members who are not present today to mark down on the calendar 17, that is Saturday, July. You're going to have your so-called test. Okay, and then the area of this thing, I will give it to you, a guideline through your Weber on which area to study. Is it okay? So now I will export this one to the Excel. So make sure this is 17 July, na Saturday. Okay, I want to stop the recording.